the mystery's strange logic. And I think we're there, allowing the mystery's strange logic. Oh, here we go. Yay. So, so this painting was on a little, I do self-retreats quite often. I often feel like I just need to be alone somewhere. And this was actually, what city is that? Anyway, it was sort of on the way to wine country. And I had a little Airbnb and I just started throwing paint. I don't always do that. I'm kind of, I draw often first because I'm often moved by some kind of image comes to me, or I've found something I fell in love with and I want to go for that. But in this case, I was just throwing color. And I thought, oh, there could be an elephant in there. So that's mystery's strange logic in some ways, you know, out of the mess. So, okay, this is a poem that I think really demonstrates that strange logic. It started out, this is about elephants again, which is one of my other obsessions of the many. And that was actually the cover drawing that I made for my book, Elephant Raga, but my publisher picked a different picture, so that's okay. I like the cover, actually. But anyway, the poem is about when I went to Syracuse University, I was in my 60s, and I often have to say, not the 60s, my 60s. So, you know, it's not what people usually go to graduate school. And it was a full-term residency, so it wasn't one of those fly in and fly out things. I had to shovel snow in Syracuse, New York. All my fellow students were in their 20s, all of them. And anyway, so I was flying back and forth to California. I was always so grateful to land in California often. And so I would see these guys with the signs, you know, that had some kind of limousine. They were going to take their passengers. And I always thought, oh, why can't that be me? So there's an example of an obsession or something. And now we're going to watch what mystery's strange logic did with that. Deplaning. At the far end of baggage claim, in pastel shirts and navy blue blazers, they look so longingly in my direction, jiggling their hopeful block-lettered signs. Hernandez, Patel, Moore. I want to go to one and say, yes, I am Mrs. Moore. So you've all had that thought, haven't you? Then turn and walk with him into a new life. Yes, I want to say to everything. Hyatt Regency poolside. Yes, praise the Lord. Oh, thank you. These bags seem to put on pounds with each new time zone. Yes. Am I attending the conference? Yes. I'm giving the keynote on my life with elephants. My life's work. Yes, amazing what they have to say in registers beneath our human ears. Expressions of love for which we have no name. No, I never made out the actual words, but they taught me with a subterranean patience. I learned to sleep standing on the savannah, rocked in a long, slow chorus of grass-scented breath. Yes, I see the traffic is terrible this way. I don't mind at all if you take the back road. And do tell me about your summer with the bears, especially the scrappy one with the torn up ear. He led you upriver to watch the salmon spawn, and you ate with him. And that fish still flops in the belly of you, that fish you shared with the gleaming, slobbering dark. I like where these things take me. Like I said, it's not really mine almost. So the next one, let's hope this works. Oh, good. So another one of my jumping off points is often Turtle Island, and that whole idea. You know, there was this book, I'm just going to throw this in, Crack in the Cosmic Egg. Some of you might have read a long time ago, Joseph Chilton Pierce. And the idea was that that the way we construct the world we're in has a lot to do with popularity. You know, what people are ready, aesthetic preference. That's what he called it, aesthetic preference. So the difference between, you know, the Big Bang, a little tiny beyond microscopic something burst into everything. Instead of that, maybe one's aesthetic preference could be that we're on a turtle and it's taking us through the cosmos, which is what the native people like. So I love that idea, and it is my aesthetic preference. And this painting was actually commissioned. I had someone who wanted, he saw a lot of my animal paintings. He said, could you do my tortoise? He had his own tortoise. So the face is very much like the tortoise I used. The shell's a little fatter because I had to put her on there. And because I wanted to call it A Day in the Sun on Turtle Island. And this is a poem that very much goes with it. Now, again, we're allowing mysteries, strange logic. That was number 2. And this starts very mundane. It starts doing laundry and folding in the underwear drawer and the whole thing. And then it finds its way. Puccini plays on Turtle Island. This morning, I cleaned house and did laundry. The underwear drawer well stocked and tidy again. Then it was my favorite path through the woods and into the used bookstore on the corner, and then the cafe and home again, where my sweetheart bakes bread and puts on opera, arias from the deep, perhaps the very same deep. The wild-eyed woman on the cliffs of Mendocino told me she was trying to find her way out of. Outside, the bird feeder is full. Cold trough continues to push down from Alaska, keeping the pear trees' buds closed in on themselves, lost in thought. The gray world out the window is at peace with herself, even as she knows the atmospheric river will continue to wash all her loves downstream. What's left of my friends have scattered: Italy, Costa Rica, the other world, Japan. It seems I've meant to sit still in this well-swept house, in this eye of turbulence and absence. It comes clear that no one can save us from falling from the edge. And now I think maybe we are ferried on the back of a great turtle after all. A tottering, benevolent beast, content with time and its machinations, content to paddle over the channels of dark matter, to hobble across the starry way. Question the way the story was told. This is one of my favorite secrets because I've always done this. I think I've just always been ornery. As a child, I remember my mother kind of using other words, but she meant ornery. And there's always something about, okay, that's what they say. That's how the story we're always told. But is that really the only way to tell that story? And this just happens to me often. And this particular painting was my Christmas card this year, which is, instead of Father Christmas, you know, it's a crone. And crones are really appearing a lot more in my work lately. I really like the crone idea, beautiful crone. And so this is the solstice crone, kind of is what she is. So that's an example of how it comes out in the painting. And here is one of my poems that challenges a Bible story, actually. It's called Salt. I have no challenges, it rewrites it. This much I know. I turn with her in every telling. Lot's wife and I in our nightgowns, straw sandals clapping at our heels. God of our childhood spitting at our backs, devouring what he has made. Trees, flowers, sheep and dogs, cows, chickens, children. Above us, a cold sky, blinding in its pitch dark radiance. The men are strangely at home here, running into the emptiness that knows them by name. Their lungs drink deep, the muscles of their thighs rejoice as they leap. The sky parts as if in answer to their towers and spires, what they hoped to touch each time they entered us. But Lot's wife and I are drawn, as always, by gravity. our branching souls seep into the teeming earth where we mingle with the unthinkable, eat light, and grow green. Half of us is hidden, a musty tangle of want, mining the depths where all are blind, yet everything courses inexplicably toward water. How could Lot know any of this? Why she spent so much of herself in the garden, burrowing among beetles and larvae, flinging endless buckets of water. All he knew was that she was his earth, his food. He knew when they stopped running, she'd plant again. There would be olive trees and date palms, a backyard explosion of lavender. Her shrine of muddy shoes and rake would frame the door. The kitchen would be steamy and fragrant with rosemary and garlic. There would be goldfish in the pond, cooking spoons, embroidery floss, grandchildren. She was not ignorant of what was required. Simple enough. Don't look back. Their God was always making rules like this with their dire consequences. Bite into an apple and your children's children's children will walk through the valley in the shadow of death. He was a God of specifications and riddles, seemed to have forgotten everything about peat moss and gravel, humus and clay. She forgave him this and meant to follow, but a tendril caught her ankle and it all rushed back. The barefoot boys of Gomorrah, their mothers hanging out clothes, elders teetering beneath bundles of wood. She saw the streets at dusk when the coolness lifted everyone without preference. She was part of everything again, coming up as pomegranate and wheat, the bright palm leaves of her hand. She was sand mouse and pipit, broomstick and windowsill. She was wind. She was fire. She was a sunflower turning its face toward its own larger self. And in a breath, she was salt, a pillar, exquisitely beautiful, translucent and still. Lot went on. He did not look back, but pushed deeper down the corridors of night, leaving his wife to be windswept and broken, dispersed, sent back to live among us, to be poured into jars and tasted on our lip, and to fall into the ordinary glory of our days. And that actually was the illustration to go with that. Although it wasn't to go with that. That's what's so interesting. This one I did a long time ago. Well, I guess I've got 2005, but I originally, I have a boyfriend whose family, when we go to restaurants, they bring crayons and other things. And we draw. And I remember drawing something similar to this we were at a breakfast place. And so the pitcher was, had maple syrup in it, but somehow it ended up with stars in it. And somehow there was a desert and a camel in there. And then there was the salt shaker. And when I actually made a little CD a while back, and it was called Salt, and that poem was in it. And this is the cover painting then, Salt. But somehow, see, our obsessions do meet. That's what I guess I want to say. I guess we are doing that one. Okay, we'll go on. So this one is just an argument again. Sometimes my best poems are arguments. And this is an argument to the adages that we hear all the time. You see them on bumper stickers. And this one is, it's never too late. Okay. So this is from my most recent book, and that is the cover painting of the most recent book, Starfall in the Temple. The temple to me is the earth itself. It is also, it's our interior temples. I love this idea of temples just being everywhere. This is called Autumn Accounts. They say it's never too late. What with George H.W.'s skydive for his 90th, and the 100-year-old water skier who bobbed and waved from my refrigerator until his photo yellowed and frayed. But it probably is too late to train in rocket science or concert piano, too late to free climb Half Dome or take up oral surgery. And it's certainly too late to die young. Still, there may be time to enter the longing and give ourselves to what we become when we turn in its light. A pitcher of twilight, an angel of glass, a grasshopper the size of a young boy's heart, a labyrinth of stones like the ones we discovered in the hills, that slow walk to nowhere, the very same nowhere we were getting to so fast. Secret number 4. Oh, good. Consider a walk in the woods. So I do have a story that goes with this walk in the woods, and this poem or this painting is just, I talked about this on Saturday, anybody who was at the little meeting. I fell in love with an image that I found in National Geographic, most likely, of a woman with a stick, and she was hobbling up the path. And you know, crones are my muses right now. And so she was making her way, and I thought, I'm going to somehow find a way to play with her in a painting. And the next thing I know, she was meeting a frog. And it says, and so we meet again. And to be honest, I don't know when they met before, but they do. So there you go. But this is, we are going to look at taking a walk in the woods. And I guess maybe I'll say that first, what I mean by that. So I used to do a writing intensive with Molly Fisk, who did an online writing intensive. And some of you maybe have even done that. And we had to write a poem a day, and it was just a week, but that's quite an intense commitment, it turned out. I would get rid of almost everything on my calendar. I would eat pot pies for dinner, like that. And I just wrote a poem every day. And so I was giving myself to that. The second day, I decided I'm going to write a poem about my grandsons, taking them to the family cottage in upstate New York, where they went fishing and they were so excited and jumping up and down. I'm writing about that. But this is a poem that I got stuck about. In fact, I have it in my notes. About 3 stanzas in, very short stanzas, I thought, I don't know what to do with this poem. The boys are jumping on the bed, but where am I going? And I took a walk. That's what I decided to do. So I went up to one of the lakes. I took a walk around the lake. And in the middle of that, it rushed in. And so never underestimate what the woods can give us. It's called Fish. We have to do our part, it seems. Make small but wholehearted gestures. Fling, for example, thin silver offerings and arcs over the water so they glint against the sky like dragonflies. Young boys catch on quickest, with the days swimming through them. By breakfast, their laps are full of bluegill and perch. That's where I went to the woods. Now I'm in the woods. My friend Bodie casts his line into the mirror each morning. How come you ain't happy? He says to the fish in the glass. He knows how unexpectedly grace can leap from the water. How entranced grace is with our rarefied air and light. Coleridge kept his hatches unbattened so the depth dwellers could slither in and out, strange primordial creatures transparent as glass, their phosphorescent skeletons flickering in the murk. Maybe he knew that every gesture is a prayer, and every prayer is answered, and every answer is a fish. That's why we see them hovering over deathbeds. Rabindranath shouting at the Brahmin priest who is praying that the poet be saved from the wheel of birth and death. Stop all this nonsense, says the poet. Tell God I want his earth and his seas. Tell him I'm hungry for fish. And Gertrude Stein, grasping at her last straws, what is the answer, she warbles, but then shakes her head and laughs. All those years of hook, line, and sinker, and it turns out I am the fish. And that painting was painted way before all this, but Fishing is another one, another one of those obsessions. Going to number 5. Oh, good. So number 5, this is my most recent painting that I just finished about a month ago, maybe. And I call this With You in Rain, Air, Shine. And it was inspired by, I was at a picnic last summer, and it was very hot. And we had hired a guitarist to play, and he was so hot that his wife held an umbrella the entire time for him. And I just, somehow the love, again, that thread, met with that. And I decided, and I love drawing rodents, actually, and bears. So there we go. So, but we are looking with child eyes again. That's what secret number 5 is. I had the incredible fortune to teach as a poet in the schools with children for 22 years. I taught almost all the first grades that were available in Marin practically, because most of the people were kind of afraid of doing first grade. You know, they thought, what could they possibly write? Well, they're amazing. I can only tell you, they taught me many things, and they opened my eyes back up, my heart back up to what's possible. So I'm just going to read one poem about that, but this is actually from not a first grader. She was 3rd grade, I'm pretty sure. And The Butterfly Effect, my most recent book, the one there's lots of on the table, Starfall in the Temple, it does a lot of looking at scientific ideas, and kind of merging them with the heart and soul. And the idea of probably most of you know, of butterfly effect is, a butterfly's wings, flapping its wings over the Sahara Desert can make a hurricane in Texas or something. So that's the idea, that things build upon one another. So this is called the butterfly effect. And I think it goes very well with the painting, which again was just, I fell in love with various images and put them together. The butterfly effect. When the unkempt girl, whose eyes are always fixed on something the rest of us can't see, leaps up midway through the day's poem to wildly swivel her arms, does the breeze she becomes touch the heads of the peonies and bring their tight buds to unwind and let go, a perfume so dense it draws in the disbelievers and shipwrecked sailors, the unhappy housewives and long-lost heralds of dawn. So that when the girl arrives home to drop her heavy pack on the floor and search the vacant lots of her mother's eyes, does she find at last a gardener whistling in with his wheelbarrow and trowel, come to shape the clouds into polar bears and possums, put in a patch of sweetgrass, rows of wild peas. So this is also a fairly recent painting, and I visit my family in San Diego often, and they become a menagerie. So I'm not the only one who likes animals. So they have 2 cats now, 2 dogs and children and all that. But this was one of their cats, and actually my grandson took this picture. He said, "Would this work?" I said, I want a cat that's gazing into the atmosphere. And there was something in me that felt, first of all, that cats live on a different dimension. That's one of my theories. And some of you who have cats probably have that. They're in a different dimension. And they're probably the best listeners. And I think, listening is one of the most important things of any creative process, is listening. And certainly of the word works, anything we're doing with words. But I think also, with painting, like just listening in, because it's here that it's going to come from. So, and I do call this late day reflections. And the other thing is that this starts with stop. So we had begin a long time back now. We're on number 6. Number 1 was begin. This is stop. So there are places along the way to stop. And sometimes you know that, and sometimes you don't, like when I stopped and then went for a walk in the woods. But when people pass, when we lose people, there's an automatic stopping. And I've talked to a few people today already even that have talked about passings that they've experienced. And I think my own experience has been that when we are stopped in our tracks, don't close it up too quickly. That'd be another way to speak of this secret. Don't close up the hole too quickly. there is something in that whole that speaks. So the two poems I'm going to do are both kind of eulogies. So this one is, it's a title poem from the book previous to this one. And it's called Indian Rope Trick. And I guess it's probably always good to give you a little background before we jump into it. And that is that I've always been fascinated, another one of my obsessions, with this idea of the Indian rope trick, which apparently, well, I don't know if it ever happened or not, but people say it did. It's a legendary. I think there's nobody alive who claims to have seen it. But it's where the magician brings a rope, throws it into the air, it stays vertical, and then he gets his assistant to climb it, and then at the top he disappears. Now, some people do say hypnosis was at the base of this. I don't know. And there even are calls to magicians that from like the England Magician Society, you know, the Royal Magician Society, to find someone that can reproduce this trick. I don't know if anybody's ever done it, but so this trick has always stayed in my mind. And then when I got the call that I knew was coming, that my brother had passed, I sat down. You know, I was stopped. And so I sat and honored the stopping. And that Indian rope trick just aroused. And this poem is one of those poems that got very little editing. It just poured out. So it's called Indian Rope Trick. It's the mystery's favorite trick, weaving the intricate rope of someone's life and then lifting it for them to climb so that somewhere near the top, they can disappear. 2 weeks ago, my brother told me he'd shot 9 holes. Pain was lousy, he said, but went on to try out punchlines he'd been practicing for his meeting with the maker. I'm not afraid to die, he said, with that curious wonder he had since the diagnosis. But this time he added that he had no regrets, none worth counting anyway. I'd taken my phone on my walk and was talking to him from the mountain at the level of ravens and hawks. He'd had a wonderful life, he said, which caused the rope of it to rise and grow taut so we could see it there in all its color. There in his yellow cowboy pajamas with his champion Alaskan yo-yo. There in the red glow of his cherry bomb days. There at the helm of the stolen tractor on a joyride over the golf club greens. And look, now he's doing figure eights on his forklift at Kodak. And now he's blasting off bottle rocket style to international VP. See him there in Paris and Philly. See him adrift on South Carolina's inlet seas. And here come the whole buzzing swarm of friends drawn in by the honey of his ease. Ah, we seem to have followed that rope right up through the clouds. I couldn't have asked for more, he said. And his exhale filled the valley, and the hawks were lifted up on the rising air. And we said goodbye. And this was a dear friend who will show up again in one of the very last poem I'm going to do. He was in his 90s. And that trickster, he just disappeared in his own inimitable way. It's called Gone. He slipped out while none of us was looking. Our Chancellor Emeritus of the country road made his exit en route amid strangers and angels, his closest kin. When the body arrived in the flashing red hubbub of ER, it was already empty. Empty as the night would be, with its owl sailing through it. Empty as the morning, with its lonely yellow light, and the breakfast nook where he shuffled his kings and queens. Each of us were left to make what sense of it we could, but alone in our private precincts, I don't think anybody could. And the painting actually is another temple painting. It's called In the Temple of Sad Goodbyes. And I don't know. Like I said, I love animals. They show up dancing like this sometimes, tango. But I felt it's a temple that the interior experience of a goodbye is a temple in itself. So sometimes the temple is outward, sometimes it's inward. So 1 foot in the known. This is a quote from Peter Brook. Of course, the other half is the other foot. Where is the other foot? It's in the unknown. And so I love this as one of my little mantras as I create. I would say both visually and writing. That 1 foot does need to be in the known. I was even writing a science fiction book and I never finished, but and maybe someday, but I realized I had to create from what I knew. I mean, there's no way, there were musical instruments, there were maybe new ones, but I was using what I knew because we have to start from the known. And yet, and I love that this is a Peter Brook quote because, he's mainly I think of him as a director and, he did some of these wonderful films. Hamlet, a beautiful version of Hamlet, actually, and some others. And I think he trained his actors that way, a foot in the known, where we're all together. And then the other foot has to go somewhere else. And so I think that's one of the things I always am trying to do. And this poem then, and that painting is just, again, a National Geographic crone that spoke to me. I just loved the light, the fire. I was just saying to someone, I don't really know how to paint in the same way I don't really know how to write a poem. I'll be honest. I don't get it exactly. It gets me. And, when I think I'm going to paint fire, I think I have no idea how to paint fire, and all I do is I look and I keep going and I erase and I sometimes pull things out, even with watercolor. I use a lot of rolls of toilet paper when I'm painting with water and I'm pulling out, and putting other in and whatever. And then somehow, I don't know, I think it's the response to love, somehow the fire says, okay, I'm coming. It might be a little while later, but okay, I'm coming. So yeah, and I think this is a beautiful example for me anyway of 1 foot in the known, because she is obviously this peasant woman stirring a fire. We know that world, but she's in the stars. She's the one who stirs the stars. So. And so this poem was written during COVID, how to befriend uncertainty. And, I was still teaching online this was with 6th graders. This is the sample poem I wrote to them. I said, we're going to write instructions for ourselves, how to get through this situation. And so I thought, well, I'll write them a sample poem. And I sat down and what's the problem? I thought uncertainty. I've never felt so uncertain. And I think maybe some of you remember that feeling as I did then, like, who's going to die? Am I going to die? What's happening? Everything's closing, like that. And so this is to myself and to anyone else who wants. How to befriend uncertainty. Come, sit in the seat by the window, near the birds who have shaken off their dreams and opened themselves to this never to be again day. Today, we won't be asked to bumble along the beaten byways, for uncertainty is our house guest. Put on the water, set out the homemade jam. Uncertainty will listen with us as our bagels pop from the toaster's dark mouth and the coffee grounds weep their bittersweet sobs. Uncertainty is mystery's love child. No history, no proper name, but she has always been with us. She is the one who wakes us to drizzle new questions into our day, new colors and light. The wind is her breath. Her body is the water we bathe in and drink. Uncertainty, with her barefoot dancing gypsy soul, knows the unpaved roads to gravity. Sorry, I always say it that way. To gratitude. What am I going to say? Gratitudinous gratitude, something like that. Uncertainty, with her barefoot dancing gypsy soul, knows the unpaved roads to gratitude by heart. But of certain things, like tomorrow, she knows nothing. And because of this, her love knows no bounds. And that painting, by the way, was the cover for a book that poem appears in, and I helped edit. So we had a pandemic puzzle poems book, and some of those poets are in this room that are in that book. And because people were fashioning puzzles. And so my co-publisher, she said, do me a cover painting that has something to do with puzzles. And to me, those are puzzle pieces that the birds are bringing, and she has a puzzle piece in her hand. So every day, a little piece of the puzzle were brought in by the birds. So that's the cover. And also, I just had great fun with salt in this particular one, because, with watercolor, if you throw salt on the color, it'll do things. And I was playing a lot with a lot of different kinds, but this is really thick salt. This is that, stuff you use to get rid of ice on the sidewalk. And so, it really made some great blossoms. And then that kind of inspired the blossoms on her dress and like that. So this is the last one. I often like to end with this poem, and this is about the man who's funny. I want to call him a boy. He was 90 when he died. He left the body in the ambulance, and that poem was called "Gone." This was when he turned 80, and this poem. He called me. We were dear friends, and he said, "Barto, I had turned 80. How did that happen?" And I said, "I don't know. How did that happen?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I was a drifter." He said, "And I drifted here." I mean, he did lots of interesting things. Believe me, he worked in, health food stores, and he was taught English in college, and he did lots of different things. But he was a drifter. And I thought, I love drifters. And so this poem is called "For the Drifters." This is a painting I did. Also, I'll just give a little heads up to the man who inspired this painting. I worked with a man named Kevin Larman at Syracuse University, and I took a class called Problems in Painting. And so my problem was not loose enough. And so he told me, go get a cup of coffee, get the most expensive piece of Arches paper you can find, and throw coffee all over it. So that's how this painting began, which was very good for me, actually, I realize. I still don't do it that often because it's expensive paper. Anyway, For the Drifters. They say the 7 continents are still drifting, nudged each year a little further into the blue. And through the sand and waterways drift the herds, goat tribes and ant colonies, pods of whales and knots of toads. For millennia, dust has drifted in and out of doorways, and in their seasons, pollen and snow. It turns out even glass drifts. The vertical panes that hold our world in place are more like sheets of rain than walls, their bottoms growing thicker down the years. And so it seems we're all leaning on water, but some of us lean harder, deeper. This poem is for you, the fallen, with limbs worn to silk. For you, light-footed ones, tramped on in the fray. This poem is for all of you solitary singers, awash in your own song. Sleep well tonight, my troubadours. Let the boat of your regret unmoor itself and drift away. The shimmer of harbor lights will reappear when that great dark ship floats out. Here we go. Thank you so much.
Prato, please raise your hand. I'll come around. Please hold your question until I bring the microphone to you.
Every now and then I take a class. I'm looking at Deepa here, who teaches wonderful classes in drawing here at the college, by the way, she's here. And I just took 2 classes with her this winter and spring. So once in a while I do. And I took, when I was at Syracuse University, I was getting an MFA in writing, creative writing, poetry. But my minor was painting, or was art, or something like that. They let me do that. So I had to take 3 courses, and I did that there. So those are all recent. You know, in the very beginning, I mean, I always painted, drew anyway, when I was a child. I think I mentioned this on Saturday when we were, that, you know, I came from upstate New York. It was rainy and cloudy. I mean, it's cloudy almost as much as Seattle, but then it snows and it rains. And so, you know, I was inside, and I love being outside, but I was inside a lot. And I found inside, wow, you got those blank papers, you can do things. So from a child, I was drawing. My mother even kept telling me she was so practical, but she kept telling me I should be an artist. And I always said I couldn't make money. So I became a psychologist. But so anyway, so I started very young drawing. It was, and every now and then I would leave it for years, actually, kind of, and then go back to it. And here and there, I would take classes. I took a wonderful class when I was a psychologist at a college, and it was just drawing, pencil drawing, and I just learned to render certain objects that just I thought was amazing. So like that, but it's mostly self-taught. When I go into my studio, it's just, yeah. Yeah, I break all the rules with watercolor. Oh, no, no, I don't do anything. The only thing I do almost every day, is yoga, brush my teeth, those kinds of things. I take care of this temple every day. And I read poems every single day. Yep. Right. It probably is good though, because the people on Zoom. Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
That's better.
Okay, thank you. I didn't see in your announcement, are you teaching a course here?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked, because yes, there is a course that is going to be this summer. It's a commitment. It's called the Poetic Pilgrimage, which I've been teaching for, I don't know, 15 years or something here. Poem making is spiritual practice, and it's the summer intensive. It's live, and it is 4 days straight. So it's 3 hours a day, 4 days in a row. And it is June 24th to June 27th. So June 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th. And we meet for 3 hours a day. We write 3 poems a day. It's very different from what I do privately. Privately, I do teach an online class in the fall and winter and spring. And that we kind of discuss poems. We take our time. We write 1 poem in 2.5 hours. This one, we're moving around. It's great because we're together and alive. And so we dance, we play music, we draw, it's like that. So, and yes, I'm glad you asked that. Yeah. Mhm.
Hi, I'm Bob Kahn, and you talked about the process of painting. What I'm curious about is your process of poetry writing. You said at one time you wrote a poem a day. I mean, for a class.
For a week.
You took a poem a day for a week. It's a lot of poetry. But when you start a poem, do you know the ending? Does it just come flowing for you?
Yeah, in fact, I would never write a poem I knew the ending to. It would be so boring. So, for example, the fish poem, it started again with love, this feeling I had for my grandkids, for the beautiful place, this lake that I get to visit, that my father built this place. And so it had that in the beginning, but where was it going? I had no idea. And then I'm just so interested to see what's underneath the initial impulse. What is underneath the initial impulse? So I'm always looking for that when I'm writing. I'm looking for a place where I'm going to be surprised. And I would say probably every poem, I can't imagine, every poem I read right now definitely has moments like that. For me, they had moments where I was surprised by where I started and where I ended up. So, and I would say, I don't think any poem I've saved doesn't have that. Does that make sense? No.
Your poems end so beautifully. And are you saying that you get to a point where that beauty comes out and you end the poem?
Yeah. Yeah, the angels say, okay, we're closing the doors. Here we go. Here's your last. It's a little bit like that. It's like I am writing. It's true. I'm writing for something that I feel is going to do something. This is very vague language for a language arts person, but, there's this feeling. I did mention, I think on Saturday when I spoke, that so interior and it's past the brain. It's not really, even though that's the interesting thing about poetry, we have to use both sides of the brain because the left side of the brain is language. And so, there's the technical side of language. But I am really listening to something that's inside, that is hidden. And I'm listening for where it ends, and I go, oh, thank you. Thank you. That sounds like the ending. It's not like I make it up. Yeah. I don't.
I'm wondering if we can go back to image number 7. Can we revisit number 7 for a moment? Can you go backwards?
Oh, you have to get back on the. You mean the secret number 7? Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe somebody wants to. Okay. So it's,
Yeah, before this.
I'll do it.
It was the
It's right
Crone.
before that, I think.
crone who's
That's it.
that's stirring the cauldron. Okay, I just want to say this is an incredible image. And it's a mixture of your poetry and your painting because she's working on the cauldron and on the fire. And so there's the consuming, but then there's the fire that's reaching her and you can see it almost enveloping her. So it's consuming her.
Mm,
It's a dance like your other images of dance.
mm, mm.
And so
Interesting.
life
Yeah.
is going on.
I mean,
or
I hope
whatever.
I don't see her as burning, but more being consumed by light, perhaps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the fire that you built underneath,
Yeah.
there's images coming up also that are very fire-like, which can be spirit or love or whatever, but it extends from the cauldron and the food and the fire all the way up her. So it's another dance, just like your bear and your.
Very good. Yeah. Dance. Very good. Anybody on Zoom want to ask? Are we doing that or?
One more here, and then let's allow the people on Zoom to ask questions.
You're very prolific in your poetry writing.
Mm.
Do you ordinarily start knowing, here's what I want to say, I have to learn how to say it?
No, but you're kind of close. I mean, what I start with, like that cow poem, Cows in Wales, is I start with something I know has got a heartbeat for me. I can hear the heartbeat in it. There's something in it. And I really did not know why I was that interested in that. But by the end of that poem, I had a whole new idea of the metaphor of being called back to something that is familiar and deep and mysterious and not where you've been living. All of that came through me. I don't know if you guys heard that, but that's what I felt when the poem was being written. It was like, wow, and even that moment in the beginning of that poem where I talk about, this is the story of a sea creature wrapped in her own warmth, because that's some of what I read, that they got bigger and bigger. The fat had to grow around them because it was cold. And then their hearts grew to the size of a Volkswagen bus, but I made it a small cathedral. But, so I use what I know, and as much as I can figure, I don't know if I even know, but as much as I sense about something, and I just keep letting it take me to someplace where now it feels like we're going to the thing that's important to me right now. Does that make sense? So I don't know where I'm going when I write a poem. I don't want to know, actually. I just want to know where I'm starting.
Remember in this,
That was my brother, yeah. Mm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that was almost verbatim conversation I had with him. We talked about the Alaskan yo-yo with cherry bombs, the whole thing. So sometimes, you're just given a lot of material.
Anyone on Zoom have a question, please?
The question from Zoom is, how do you continue to deal with fear in approaching the blank page and or canvas, the unknown? Giovanni Singleton, friend of Prathos.
Hi, Giovanni. Wonderful. I'm so glad you asked. I want to hear your answer to that one, but I guess I have to give mine. So that's probably part of the excitement. You know, my sweetheart is an actor, and he often when I talked to him today, because he couldn't come, he had a doctor's appointment, but and he said, "Oh, it's good you don't know what you're going to say." Because I told him, I don't know what I'm going to say, and I'm nervous. He said, "You need that for an edge, you know." So there is, and that's what actors know, you know. And I have seen it in the years that I've been presenting now live in front of an audience, and that's another kind of fear. So I think there's something about that fear of the blank page. There's also the attraction. You know, we have to be a little bit of a daredevil. I think that's why I started with begin. I think, you know, you have to be a bit of a daredevil. You're going to show up on your paper and, you know, you might be like, oh, I don't know if that's what I want, but that's what came, you know, so, and that's part of the joy of it, really.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Okay, just a reminder that Pato has her books back here in the back for sale, and she will sit and sign your books.
Mhm.
Correct? Yeah. And let's thank Pato and give her another round of applause for a wonderful presentation.
I will say one more thing. I do have a sign-up sheet if you'd like to be on my mailing list. I send out things, announcements about the classes I teach, that some of them are online, so you wouldn't see them in the catalog. And then also, I have 2 field trips coming up this summer, and one of them is a boat trip on the ferry to San Francisco, and I've done it for a couple summers in a row now. It's one of my favorite things to do. So, you know, you'll look at we'll look at poems together. I'll give you an assignment to do on board the boat. We get off, we have lunch together, we hang out in the city a little bit, and then I come back. So you can sign up for that as well. Yes. Right now they are. I recently was approached that maybe I should go back to a class I taught once called Meditation and Creation. We'll see if I do that. But right now it's poetry.
Thank you. Would you say a little more about how you use salt? If I understood, you use salt in your painting?
Oh, what was the question? Solve. I thought that's what. Oh, salt. Oh, I thought you said solve. I was thinking of problems of painting. A salt. Well, you know, salt is an interesting process, and I do use it quite a lot in watercolor because I really like these interesting textures that I'm not fully in control of. And I will also say that's one of the reasons I like watercolor. I love the translucence of it. You know, I love the fact that you can see through it. That's a big part of it. But the other thing is I like the fact that it gets away from you. You know, that I have a drawing and then there goes the water and you have to just go where it goes. So the thing about salt is it does create these beautiful random-ish, you can control them a little bit, patterns, textures. And so the trick though, and it's taken me a while to learn, is, you know, you have to have just the right amount of moisture in the paper. So if it's too dry, it's not going to work. And if it's too wet, it won't really work either. I mean, you get something a little bit, but not much. So it has to be right in the middle. So you have to play around a little and you put the salt in and there's other things you can use. I mean, one of the things I tend to use too is saran wrap, and you bunch it up and you put it on your watercolor paper and hold it there for a little bit. But again, it really has to do with how much water and how much pigment and drying time, what works and what doesn't.
Thank you.
Oh, there you go. No. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Prato, I've been privileged to be in many of your classes, and oftentimes you've also shared a song or two. Is there any way you would bring that part of your talent to us today in just even a little moment?
That's so interesting because I had put maybe even a song. I did put that on the flyer, didn't I? Maybe even a song, I think. But I felt like, okay, I'll do it. I mean, it doesn't take much, as you can see, get me to do it because I do write songs, but mostly I don't write songs on the, I do play a little guitar and I sometimes use that, but mostly I write my songs driving or walking. And one of the songs, I think the one that probably would go best here, I wrote when I was driving a boat, a canal boat, a boat on the canal of the Camargue in Provence. So it was a wonderful trip where we rented a boat and we had a little kitchenette in there and we slept in there and we drove. But the thing is, on the canal, I think the speed limit was something like 5 miles an hour. So, it's a very slow day that you're driving. And so I was driving for a couple hours and this is the song that came. Good. My pilgrims know this song because I sing it often. Flowing with the river, Big Mama River, moving like the water, a cool and grateful daughter, flowing with the river. Great blue heron leads the way, the gulls and the egrets too. And if you sing along and spread your wings, they might start lifting you when you're rolling with the river. Big Mama River, moving like the water, a cool and grateful daughter, rolling with the river. I guess I'm going to the last verse because that's all I can remember. Someday the sky will get so heavy and dark, it just might fall on you. But try not to forget that getting wet is what you signed on to do when you're rolling with the river. Big Mama River, moving like the water, her cool and grateful daughter, rolling with the river. Big Mama River, Big Mama River. Thank you. My peeps don't there. Anything to say? No? Oh, and I do want to thank our tech people. They have been so kind and so attentive. And there's more food too.